And therefore, the increase in education, both of workers in organizations and of their customers, I think necessitates this very broad shift in the nature of authority towards flat organizations, towards networks, towards virtual corporations. So another way of thinking about this is that a network, that is to say a network of shared values, of reciprocity, of friendship, and so forth, what I've been describing as social capital is not perhaps an alternative to hierarchical organization, because I don't think that's ever going to go away, but it is something that exists parallel to and on top of formal hierarchical organizations and explains why it is that they work. And these networks, this kind of social capital is everywhere in a complex society. In some sense, you can describe a society in terms of these circles of trust. So the large circle is the society as a whole. The one that partly overlaps the large circle may be a group of immigrants that have ties to another society and yet are anchored in the society where they now live. The inner circles may be organizations, churches, NGOs, different kinds of associations by which people come together. And you can map all of these overlapping and intersecting circles, and that's the actual way that information and knowledge and innovation flow within a society. So within a hierarchical corporation, hierarchy is not going to disappear. We need hierarchy for quite a lot of different reasons, but every hierarchical organization also has what could be described as an organizational culture or a corporate culture. Hewlett-Packard, before its latest troubles in the last decade, always had this thing called the HP way, which was a sense of shared norms within the company that put engineering and innovation in a, gave it a priority in the way that workers their organization. And similarly, I think good managers understand that the task of management is not to move around these boxes in an organization chart, it's to worry about the larger circle, the shared norms that exist within the organization. In the American intelligence community after September 11th, we've had all these terrible problems because the FBI doesn't want to talk to the CIA, and the American Congress in its great wisdom said, okay, all we need to do is put one guy at the top that's the director of national intelligence, and he'll force everybody to cooperate. And what he doesn't understand, or what these, what the politicians didn't understand, is that the sharing of information within a bureaucratic culture is not a matter of some boss at the top ordering people to share information. It really is a matter of the culture of the organization. Culture of the FBI is a prosecutor's culture in which information is not shared because you don't want to undermine prosecutions. The culture of the CIA is to not share information because you don't want to compromise your sources and methods. And when you put these two organizations together, it is the large circle, it's the shared values that explain the behavior. It's not whether there's a boss over the top of them that's telling them what to do. So I think any intelligent manager understands that it's the shaping of the common values shared within the organization that explain how information is going to flow and how people will cooperate with one another. You can have bad forms of social capital within organizations or within societies, and so this is a typical one where people are promoted on the basis of favoritism, on the basis of being related to the boss or having an affair with some senior manager and the like. And obviously, this is something that corporations have to worry a lot about. But this kind of network of trust, this shared social capital, is absolutely critical to the operation of all of these new forms of organizations. So, for example, in a flat organization, if you don't have middle managers, people have to manage themselves. You have to delegate authority. People have to work cooperatively with one another, and that's why the rise of teams and shop floor interaction on the part of low-ranking workers became such an important mantra in the corporate world in the last couple of decades. Obviously, also, the vertical trust between managers and workers is critical for the reasons that I outlined. If you don't trust your workers, then they're not going to trust you, and you're not going to get them to make suggestions, take risks, do things for the sake of the organization as a whole. Then finally, it's also critical for outsourcing and for various kinds of virtualization. And it's critical also in terms of the way that firms interact in, I think, an entrepreneurial and successful region. And so this is the Silicon Valley story. Silicon Valley has been studied extensively by many people because everybody in the world would like to create their own Silicon Valley. And I don't think that many of the observers have really understood what the source of the valley's advantage is. There's an interesting fact about Silicon Valley when you, for example, compare it to Route 128, the ring that goes around Boston, which, like Silicon Valley, is home to a lot of high-tech firms that has been a bed for a lot of computer and semiconductor innovation. But in the end, Boston proved to be a much less durable source of technological innovation than Silicon Valley. Why was that the case? It is an interesting fact that contracts written in Massachusetts tend to be thicker than contracts written in Silicon Valley. Why do you have a thick contract? You have a thick contract because your lawyers are saying to you, your partner, your business partner is going to cheat you, and unless you write a long contract in which you try to outline every possible form of cheating and guard against that, the business deal isn't going to work. In Silicon Valley, the contracts are shorter because people trust one another. The venture capitalists, the entrepreneurs, the workers are able to combine and recombine despite their individualism and competitiveness because there is an overarching set of shared norms that exist between people in that part of the world. Part of that, I think, I mean, if you look at it historically, it kind of comes out of the hippie culture of the Bay Area, of San Francisco in the 1960s, where there was a very strong norm of sharing. But if you think about open source software, that's the way it comes about. Something like the Linux operating system is the result of voluntary contributions of programmers who spend their time putting things into the public domain. Why do they do that? They do that because there's a norm that says, if I give today, I'm going to get back as much tomorrow because other people are going to do exactly the same thing. And that's something that doesn't happen in every part of the United States, and it's not something that happens in every part of the world. There's a famous story. You may know that Intel and AMD are the two big manufacturers of CPUs, of central processing units. They're ferocious competitors in which an advantage of a few weeks or a few months in introducing a new chip can mean the difference between survival and bankruptcy. There was once a case where AMD received a complex piece of capital equipment for manufacturing chips a few months before Intel did. And the AMD managers, the engineers at AMD spent a lot of time breaking down the equipment, trying to figure out how to incorporate it into their production process. And then when their friends at Intel said, they got the same machine, they went to the AMD people and they said, how did you do this? And the AMD people shared that information with them. Now, if you think about this like an economist, this makes no sense at all. These companies are fierce competitors, and basically what AMD was doing was giving away an important industrial secret to its competitor. Why did this work and why did this happen? Well, it happened because of social capital. It happened because there was a shared norm. These engineers had gone to, they'd gone through the same electrical engineering program at Berkeley or Stanford, and they were friends, and they shared ideas and innovations over drinks. And so they were not jealously guarding every single piece of intellectual property that the company generated. And that reduced transaction costs. It meant that if we help you in this time period, then down the road, you're going to help us. And that's a perfect example of social capital in action. And as I said, it really does not exist in every part of the world. And I think that that is one of the hidden ways in which innovation spreads and has become so powerful in that part of California. Now, let me move on to a more prescriptive part where I want to try to explain, all right, so I've now said trust is really important, social capital is critical, politically, economically, so where does it come from? Well, I think there are several different sources. The first obvious source is human biology. We are social creatures by our genetic makeup. A lot of modern political theory starts out from this idea that we're somehow isolated individuals and we only come together, our normal state is to fight each other, and we only come together to cooperate as a result of a social contract that happened at some point in human history. And this is actually nonsense. And the fact is that human beings have always been social animals from the time that they weren't human beings. That is to say, chimpanzees and other primates cooperate in very similar ways to human beings. So there was never a point in human history in which our cognitive systems didn't support certain kinds of cooperation. The biologists call one inclusive fitness, which is that we help relatives. We help genetic relatives. We are altruistic to people that we share genes with. Another form is reciprocal altruism. I do a favor for you, you do a favor for me. That is the basis of 90% of the cooperation that goes on in any society. And so we build on a biological foundation. Our whole cognitive systems are geared towards enhancing our ability to work together. The second source is what the economists would call rational choice. That is to say, we calculate that it is in our benefit to work together. There's a lot of, if you study modern economics, you understand that a lot of cooperation is the result of playing what the economists call prisoner's dilemma games with each other repeatedly. And if you do this, you actually develop a self-interest, a selfish interest in cooperation. So even a society full of devils, as the philosopher Kant would say, would behave honestly because it's in the interest of every devil to have collaborators and friends and therefore people that they can work with. So even purely selfish individuals are going to learn certain norms of honesty and reciprocity. All right, the final source of cooperation are institutions. That is to say, generally shared rules about behavior that limit our individual choice, and there are many sources of these. One of the sources is religion and what we now call culture. A lot of people in Europe and the United States are no longer religious, but they still share common cultural values. And the fact that you share cultural values does not mean that you have social capital necessarily. It doesn't mean that you're not going to cheat people or you're going to be dishonest. What a shared culture does is it makes it easier to decide whom to cooperate with. It makes it easier to solve those prisoner's dilemma games that the economists talk about, and therefore to come to cooperative solutions. And that's why in America, if you go to a big city like Chicago or New York, the businesses are organized by